Dear students, our today's topic is lecture method, and in today's video you will come to know about the various dimensions of the lecture method, what are the merits and demerits of lecture method, and accordingly what are the desirable qualities for using the lecture method, and how the lecture method can be made more effective. These aspects we are going to cover in this video. So first of all, let's think about the lecture method. And for lecture method, there are some points which must be elaborated initially to understand lecture method. So lecture method, basically it is a method of teaching, and this method of teaching is used in almost all the subjects. So without any text, lecture method is used in a classroom to teach without any text. It means a teacher is not using any textbook, or a teacher is not using any type of text, and in this way the lecture method is used only by speech. It means only in the verbal mode lecture method is used, and no other activity is going on in the classroom. And the third thing about the lecture method is it is a continued explanation. So lecture method is basically uninterrupted phase of teaching. It is an uninterrupted style of teaching where the explanation is continued, and from A to Z all things are explained in the style of using teachers own tactics, strategies and methods. So lecture method is a continued explanation. In this method, explanation is in the center point, and the wholeheartedly a teacher used to explain the concept in a way it is very easy for the student to understand. The fourth aspect of lecture method is there is a flow of continuity. Lecture method, it's clearly identified with a great flow of continuity. So uninterruption, and there must be uninterruption in the terms of flow of continuity. So once a teacher start using appropriate words, and then using the appropriate sentences, and by using the effective communication, flow of continuity is maintained in the lecture method. So continuity of flow is a great dimension of the lecture method. Another aspect of lecture method is in this method teacher remains active and student remains passive. It means all the way teachers are doing all the things, and only one thing is that a teacher is using the narrative style and the speaking style, and by using the speech, uh, a lot of words, a teacher is able to continue with explanation, and in the same way students are remain passive. Now let's talk about the meaning of lecture method. Lecture method is basically taken from the Latin word lectura, which means to read out. It means it is a type of method which believes in reading out the things, spelling out the things, and it is moreover a verbal transmission without any interruption. It is this whole soul process of this method is that it is based on the verbal transmission, and there is no other activities held, so there is no interruption at all. And it can be also said that it's a comprehensive explanation. It is a method which comprises of comprehensive explanation. So the sole process lies in the explanation comprehensively. It can be summarized that lecture method is the method aiming at elaboration and explanation of any concept, and it includes all those processes, and which are based on the verbal transmission, and as there is no other dimensions involved in this process, So it is throughout the process without interruption, resulting into the comprehensive explanation. So lecture method is a method in which uh, only and only explanation and elaboration is mentioned, and it is established uh, by a particular process of using verbal communication. And in this method, the teacher remains at the center place, and the students remains inactive in this particular method. Let's talk about some other aspects of lecture method. It is also called that lecture method is a method where the sage is on the stage. Sage means a philosopher who has a lot of wisdom, and that person is on the stage. So, for the lecture method, it is well said that sage on the stage. It means lecture method is used by some knowledgeable person who are having some authority over the knowledge, and they speak something, and that is called lecture. Another aspect is it is also called as a chalk and talk method. It means it's a traditional method, and it is being criticized nowadays because of the chalk and talk method, because it is not inviting any kind of activity from the student point of view, and it is not inviting the students interaction. So it's a traditional method where the chalk and talk, only the two things were used to to be taught to the students. Another aspect is that it is an expert style. So whenever an expert deliver something, that is called lecture, and only an expert can do the justice with something called lecture. The another aspect is that lecture method is well supported by the idealism. As per the philosophy of idealism, the teacher is expected to have a lot of knowledge, and ideal knowledge, sound knowledge, and that knowledge is the authoritative knowledge, and that is to be transmitted to the students. So lecture method supports, it's well supported by the idealism's philosophy. Another aspect of lecture method is it is not everybody's cup of tea. It means lecture method, it seems that it's quite easy, but actually it is not easy. So it cannot be handled by any teacher. So it requires a lot of caliber and potential, and a lot of talent required, and a lot of skills are required for delivering a lecture. So it seems, though it seems very easy, but it is not too easy. It has something special, and so only the special person can deliver a true lecture. Another aspect of lecture method is that it is regarded as autocratic method. It is regarded as autocratic method because students are not involved in this process, and they are merely a passive listener. So, as it is a task to be done solely by the teacher, it is called autocratic method. Let's talk about the merits and advantages of lecture method. The first merit goes for the lecture method is that it is quite useful for new knowledge. As we all know that new knowledge is totally different from our previous knowledge. So establishing new knowledge into the minds of student, it's not an easy task, and it requires a lot of concept clarity and concept connections between all those dimensions and aspects of that new knowledge. So revolving around those aspects requires a lot of elaboration and explanation, and that is found in the lecture method. So it can be well said that a lecture method is quite useful for the inculcation of new knowledge. The second merit is that it is good for deeper understanding of any particular concept. As it is the characteristic of lecture method that uh, a lot of concept clarity and elaboration just goes for the better understanding for the for that particular concept. So for better and deeper understanding of particular concept, it is quite useful. And the third merit of the lecture method is that it is good for better clarification. And clarification, that making connections between the other aspects and all relevant aspects, uh, it requires a lot of clarification. And lecture method is well characterized for this particular part. And it can be said that a lecture method is quite useful for better clarification of any concept. So whenever a teacher is willing to go for better clarification, deeper understanding, so then a teacher must choose to go for using the lecture method. Fourth one is that it saves time and energy. It's a characteristic of lecture method that it can be organized for the large number of student at a time. And so it can go for the more than 100 student if the technology and other facilities are available, just like mics and other sound system. So it can reach to the maximum number of students at a time, and in this way it saves time and energy as well. And even that any particular syllabus can be finished in a very less time. So it may be concluded that it saves time and energy. Another merit is that it expands thinking power of the student, as there is no interaction of the students in between. They are just relying on their thinking power, and they are in the only process of the thinking process. So accordingly they are bound to think about the sad content by the teacher. So it expands the thinking power of the student, because they are if they are sitting and listening continuously about any particular topic, it provoke their mind to think better. Next merit is that the development of imagination. It is the result of lecture method that imagination power is also developed because of this, because students are doing nothing, they are doing only the thinking uh, job. So it's quite expected that their imagination power will be developed out of this method. Next one is that the development of reasoning. While listening the important concept verbally, as they are not involved in any other activity, so their whole concentration is just on the listening part, and then they can their mind is always engaged in analyzing the things. So out of those analysis, it is quite expected to get some development of reasoning in between the students. The next merit is that the development of listening skill, and of course this method is very vital for this particular, as it is a well known fact that listening is the first input of any particular concept. So from the input point of view, listening skill is very much important, and lecture method provides such opportunity to the students that their listening skill may be developed out of this method, and because of the good listening skill, a student may be able to get the right input in their mind, resulting into the right analysis of that particular concept. Now let's talk about the demerits and disadvantages of this lecture method. The first demerit is that it invites monotonous condition circumstances in the classroom. Monotonous is a type of condition where the students are getting the same thing in the same way. So during these kind of conditions, students are bound to be in the monotonous situation where psychologically it is not good for learning, and in this process the students may get some boredom, and they may not find that lecture particularly interesting to them. The second demerit of lecture method is that it is less interesting. Because of the monotonous process, it becomes less interesting to the students, and resulting in the process that students are not taking interest in that particular lecture. Third demerit of lecture method is that inactive students are not doing anything. Students are just sitting idle, and they are just keep on listening the things. So they, over the time, they become inactive in the sense that they are not doing anything, they are not participating, there is no interaction. And because of these things, lecture method is called uh, a, a process of method which makes students inactive. Fourth demerit is that no activity happened in the classroom, only the communication, verbal communication goes on. And the fifth demerit of lecture method is that there is a less scope of using senses. Only one listening skills is being used by the students, and so only the hearing senses are being used, none other senses are being used in the lecture method. And the sixth demerit of lecture method is that there is a chances of deviation while using the lecture method. A teacher may not focus on the targeted topic and concept. Sometimes in the process of elaboration, and they may go for in a diverse and a different zone of explanation, where students may not find suitability in connecting the things easily. So it can be labeled as uh, the demerit of lecture method is that there is a lot of chances of getting deviated. And the seventh demerit is that it is not suitable for junior classes, at as students are not habitual of sitting idle, and they are supposed to do something in the classroom. So to be on the active mode is most required thing for the junior classes. So and as there is no scope of doing any other activity in the lecture method, it can be said that it is not suitable for the junior classes. So the last one is that it can be said that the demerit of lecture method is that it is not supported by the psychology and psychological process. So, after discussing the merits and demerits, and obviously there are many demerits about the using the lecture method, but there are some suggestions uh, which can which can make it more interesting and effective. And these suggestions are: the first one is by adding the interesting events and examples. Only a plain lecture cannot create any effectiveness in the mind of student. So to make it more effective, I think the interesting events and examples must be added in the lecture, and those events and examples must be suitable, it must be interesting, as well as a teacher must know when to use these events and it must be appropriately used, and so that it may seem to be interesting to the students. So by adding interesting events and examples, the lecture method can be made more effective. Second, by using stimulus variation, the lecture method is a kind of method that start from podium and it end at podium sometimes. Because of this particular style, the lecture method become too monotonous, and it's against the psychology as well. Because if any student or all the students are focusing at a single point for a long time, it may invite their sleep. So they may go for sleep. They may go for sound sleep even. So to avoid this kind of things, the stimulus variation may be used for making lecture method more effective. And the stimulus variation means a teacher must take some round in the classroom, sometimes not sticking to a particular point. They may have some variation in standing as well as even in the terms of switching. Even sometimes they may go for writing something on the board, then they may face towards the student. Sometimes they may go towards using the teaching aid. They may use the PPT as well. They can show the charts, they can show the some visual and video things. So these things, these stimulus variation can make lecture method more appropriate and effective. Instead of using the lecture method from a single point and only from standing from the dice, lecture method is being delivered, then it's going to be obviously monotonous and boredom for the student. So this kind of stimulus variation may be used by a teacher so that the lecture method can be made more effective. And to make lecture method more effective, the simple language may be used for delivering the lecture, as the jargon words and difficult words make it more worst. So instead of using complicated and difficult words, a teacher may use the simple language, and simple words may be used. Even sometimes local language may be used, so that if the students are getting the meaning and if they are getting what the teacher is saying actually, then they will feel interested. So only by using the simple language, even the lecture method may be interesting, as the students start taking interest as they are getting it. If they're not getting what the teacher is saying, as the words are very difficult, even they need to convert, they need more dictionaries to convert those words into the simple and their known words. So I think that becomes more difficult for the students, and the result is obvious that they start feeling bored in that lecture. So it may be avoided by using the simple language. Another one is that in between the teacher must ask some question to check whether students are alert or not. So to check the alertness, the student may be asked some question, so that they will be in the active mode, and they will be on the alert mode. And for those students, and for those students who are not taking interest in the class, and asking the question is quite obvious, and it may make a lecture method more effective. And another suggestion is that some humor may be added in the class while delivering the lecture, as most of the top and efficient lecturer use this method. And then in between the lecture, and they use some such type of talk relevant talk which creates some humor, and because of that humor the students get connected with the lecturer and the teacher. So this is a very good trick to use some humor. The great lecturer used this trick, and that must be used, and that is very effective. The another suggestion is that it must be lecture method must be targeted and focused. If a lecture is going on where the everything is going as per the target and the focus, so the student take interest, and because of that continuity and focus and the targeted things, the main things remain in the focus, and student take interest. Another suggestion is to make lecture method more effective is that, and then the student must be given some study material or notes in the end, so that whatever they have listened, and whatever they have come to know about in the classroom, so they may get it confirmed after reading those materials, and those reading materials must be in accordance with the matter given in the lecture. So, giving the appropriate study material in the form of some footnote or notes type of things, which may create some good thing for the lecture method. Now let's talk about the desirable qualities of teacher for lecture method. As we all know that lecture method is not everybody's cup of tea. So to use lecture as a method, there must be some desirable qualities in a teacher, and those qualities are: the first one is that clear loud voice. A teacher using the lecture method must have the clear and loud voice. In the absence of these two things, clarity in the and the loudness in the voice, a teacher cannot make an impression over the student, and the student are not going to listen them carefully. As the lecture method is all about the listening method, so the clarity and the loudness of the voice is very much important, and that is very much desirable. And the second thing is that good communication skill. A teacher must know the communication skill, whatever the medium may be there, but the clarity of the concept will come through the good communication skill only. So good communication skill includes the skill of using the appropriate words, and using the right sentences, and using the right pauses, and so the good communication make the lecture method more effective. So good communication is a prerequisite for the good and effective lecture method. The third one is that stimulus variation. A teacher must know how to use the stimulus variation. And the fourth one is the voice modulation. That is a quality required for a teacher using the lecture method. Voice modulation is a skill basically, and a teacher must know how to use the voice modulation, and it makes lecture method more effective. And the fifth one is the content mastery. That is the most important. Unless and until the content is not at the mastery level, that kind of flow and the continuity is not expected. So content mastery is prerequisite for the lecture method, and so it becomes obvious eligibility of a teacher to have content mastery, and so that there will be a good kind of flow and continuity while delivering the lecture. The another quality that is relevant, a teacher must be confident and the self motivated. In the absence of these two, a teacher cannot be in that zone where a teacher may be having some control over the class. Unless and until the class is not under the control of a teacher, a lecture method is not going to be effective. To be confident and self motivated is a desirable quality for a teacher. In the end, let's talk about when to use lecture method. So a lecture method may be very useful and effective for some particular situation and circumstances. For clarifying difficult concept, the lecture method can be used boldly and efficiently, and it will be very useful in this context for clarifying difficult concept. And the second, the condition where it can be used, it is for elaboration. Anything, any concept, any situation where the elaboration is required, and their lecture method can be used undoubtedly for further explanation, for more elaboration, for more explanation. For it invites deeper concentration and deeper knowledge and deeper understanding. So for if these kind of conditions, I think the lecture method can be used. The third context where it can be used is that wherever the time is relevant and the time is constraint. So in that condition where the syllabus completion is a matter, and there is if there is a less time and a lot of things to be covered, then I think the lecture method is the most important method, and no other method can be used in that context. So whenever it is required to save time, when you are running short of time, so in that context the lecture method can be used. And the fourth condition, for introducing unknown concept, uh, any concept which is very new, unknown to the student, and that is the only method. I think the lecture method is the only method through which these new and unknown concepts can be made understood to the students, as these concepts are new to them. So clarifying and elaboration is much required, and lecture method can give this facilitation. Despite of the many demerits and disadvantages, even the lecture method is very important. And from the ancient time till the in our modern time as well, this method is used knowingly, unknowingly, directly or indirectly. It is blamed and criticized many times, but every time lecture method is used by almost every teacher, so it is a good method to be used. But one must know when to use, how to use, and by whom to be used. So lecture method is a unique kind of method, and sometimes it becomes so general method that can be applied in almost every condition. These